IVC. There's a thread doing the rounds at the moment on YouTube, which was started by Dom at Seeking a Thread. And it's a thread I really want to jump in on. It's all related to this book. People are calling it the Acid Archive Diaries. And Dom's idea was for the vinyl community to get together and basically review ultimately every album in this book, which is quite a tall order because I think there's 5,000 albums reviewed in this. And some I doubt any of us have. This is a fantastic reference work and a shopping list in some ways. It's kind of tricky being based in the UK because all of the albums reviewed in here are from the US and Canada, and they're all, or pretty much all of them, are private or local label releases. There are some major label releases, but only pretty obscure ones that probably didn't get an awful lot of attention back in the day. So finding originals of these albums is really difficult. Even finding reissues can be pretty hard, particularly in the UK. But I reckon I've probably got somewhere in the region of about 100 of the titles from this book. Mainly reissues, some originals. But I thought this was a really good opportunity for me to do some videos, perhaps a little more regularly than I normally manage. No promises there, of course. But I'm just going to review one album at a time from this. And it's just a way of keeping my finger in while I'm doing the research for my other videos. The people I've seen so far who've contributed to this are Dylan from Noble Records, of course, Dom at Seeking a Thread, Psychedelic, there's a channel called Crazy Jimmy's Vinyl, which I hadn't seen until I started searching out these Acid Archive videos, and he seems to have everything and all originals, so fantastic channel. And Norman Maslow, of course, Mazzy. So not a huge number. I'll probably miss some. There are probably some others out there, but I thought I'd jump in on it. Perhaps be the first Brit to get involved. I don't know. Perhaps I'm not. Perhaps someone else has done it. But that's the introduction out of the way. Today I'm going to talk about this album. It's All Meat, their self-titled one and only album, which came out in 1970. They were a Canadian band, and this was one of the rare items from the Acid Archives which was actually issued on a major label. They were on Columbia Records, but it was only released in Canada, so it didn't get very wide distribution. It is pretty rare. If you can find a copy, it's going to set you back somewhere between 300 and 500 quid. And this is a reissue, and an unofficial one at that. I think this was pressed in Hungary in the late 1980s. It's got the original artwork, I believe. And it looks like my copy's got some ringware, which in fact it doesn't. What they did, they actually scanned the original artwork from another copy, which obviously had ringware. So all the bootleg copies have this ringware on them. Got to say, this sounds really good for an unofficial reissue. Probably a needle drop as well. But, you know, sometimes you shouldn't let that put you off. In fact, Patrick Lundberg, in his introduction here, says that sometimes unofficial pressings sound better than official reissues, just because they're done with love by collectors rather than by cynical record companies trying to cash in. So if you can find this, do pick it up. It sounds great. And it's limited to just 340 copies. I think mine is copy number 113. It came with this insert, just like a photocopied A4 page with a photo of the band, a little bit of information there, including the fact that there's an extra track on the album, which is the A side of their one of their two singles, a track called Feel It. So that's just tagged onto the end of the album. The labels are your typical bootleg style labels, very simple, white labels with typed text on them. But like I say, it sounds great. I have no complaints at all, and the chances of me ever getting an original are somewhere around 0, so I have no problem with reissues when things are this rare. If I waited around for originals, I would have a very small record collection because they just do not come up. So what can I say about this? It starts off with a track called You Don't Notice the Time You Waste. And it's a very Stonesy track. Propulsive bass, trashy guitar, a cheap sounding organ. Very much in that sort of Stonesy garage sort of mould. And I will go track by track because as I'm just reviewing the one album, it does seem like the logical thing to do. The second track is called Make Some Use of Your Friends. And this is, again, it's a very garage track. There's a nice minor key chord switch in there somewhere. And to me, it sounds almost like the New York Dolls if they were a 60s band. I mean, there's the Stones influence in there. So, yeah, that's an obvious link to the New York Dolls. But it definitely has that New York Dolls kind of vibe to it. The third track is probably the best track on the album, to be honest, or equal best. It's called Crying Into the Deep Lake. And it's 10 minutes of kind of chilled, dreamy hybrid of Doors and Iron Butterfly with prominent organ. And there's organ all over this album, as well as some great acid fuzz guitar. But that is a fantastic, dreamy track and well worth checking out. The final track on the first side is called Roll My Own, and that has a real punky, Stones, Doors sort of feel to it, with, again, sort of vocals that bring to mind David Johansen from the New York Dolls. Side 2 starts with a track called Self-Confessed Lover, which, not a lot to say about that one, just has a sort of bluesy garage swagger to it. Then that's followed by a track called If Only, which is a bit of a ballad. It has kind of a tremulous, I think it's a sort of Farfisa organ in that one, and that's a decent track. But then it goes up a gear for You Brought Me Back to My Senses, which is a bit of a return to that Doorsy psych garage strut again, with a trashy guitar solo, a snotty sort of Jagger-esque vocal, and a buoyant bass line. That's a definite highlight. But possibly keeping the best till last, maybe on a par with Crying Into the Deep Lake, is the final track on the original album called Sunday Love. 9 minutes long. It's got a fragile sort of a vocal, a circular organ riff, some gentle guitar picking, and a hypnotic kind of mellow bass line. And to me, it has a real Stone Roses feel to it. Obviously, the Stone Roses came a lot later, but if you're familiar with the Stone Roses, that will give you an idea of what this track sounds like. It does kind of up the pace as it goes on, and the guitar gets sort of bratty and coarse, and the vocal and the instrumentation cop a bit of an attitude. But then it kind of flips back again, and we get some superb, almost Spanish-style electric acid guitar meanderings, and a return to that kind of Stone Roses sort of fragile feel. Quite an epic track, absolutely superb, and warrants purchasing this album on its own. Like I say, tagged onto the end of this album is a bonus track, which is the A side of their first single. It's called Feel It, and it's a nice snotty Animal Stone style organ fried garage rocker. So decent way to finish the album. Great record. I will, as seems to be the way these things are being done, I will read you the original review from the Acid Archives. I should say that the reviews in this, it's edited by Patrick Lundberg, but I think it's about 10 or a dozen writers who contribute the reviews to this, including people like Richard Morton Jack and so on. So people who know what they're talking about, perhaps don't always get the reviews right. I disagree with some of their reviews, but that's inevitable. But for It's All Meat, what do they say? One of the classic Canadian rarities, It's All Meat deliver ballsy Stones-influenced hard rock with some psychedelic West Coast moves. The music has an arresting immediacy thanks to a typically classy Columbia recording, essentially cut live in the studio. The band produces a dynamic sound that mixes atmospheric organ with lots of ripping in-your-face fuzz guitar. The flashy, somewhat derivative vocals used to bother me a bit, but over the years I've grown quite accustomed to them, even if they're not among the band's greatest assets. While the bulk of the album is classic rock, in the best sense, Crying into the Deep Lake is an epic Dawsey hashish trip, and the melodic Sunday Love slowly builds towards a great ragga fuzz finale. Among the hard rockers, I find You Brought Me Back to My Senses particularly hard to resist, but this is an album full of great moments, and it stands up to a seemingly infinite number of plays. The early vinyl bootleg is non-gatefold and shows coverware residue from the original that was used, while none of the reissues captures the full dynamics and presence of a 1970 pressing. There are 2 non-LP 45 tracks. The band name doesn't come from the Eric Burden track, but from a dog food commercial. So yeah, I forgot to mention my copy is a single sleeve. The original was a gatefold, and obviously there's been more than one bootleg because my bootleg is not a gatefold. But really good album. This is a spectacular reference book. I keep threatening to show my collection of music reference books because they are an invaluable tool for reviewing, purchasing, hunting down records. But this is one of the best and can still be had. A lot of these things go out of print, but this second edition of the Acid Archives I think is still available. So yeah, there you go. I will be back with another one of these videos at some point. A couple of the ones I was going to review have already been taken, but there's plenty more to choose from. So I'll see you again for another video really soon. Take care. Bye for now.